review of Ori and the Blind Forest, Definitive Edition, anyway. So to start, I'll go over the rating criteria for the game, so as to set the scene, so to speak. I'll be splitting the rating into different categories. I'll give each one an overall score, and then the score will add up to the final game score at the end. All the ratings will be out of 10, added together for the final score. So, with that in mind, the categories are story, gameplay, graphics, and sound. So these are the main categories, just to keep things simple. However, there's going to be some tertiary categories as well. So, for the story, there will be narrative pacing, tone, and consistency. Gameplay will have challenge, skill ceiling, and intricacy for controls. Graphics will have style, animation, and effects. And sound will have soundtrack and sound effects. Aside from these, there will be some small notions to the studio itself and the game's cost, because it could be the best game on the planet, but if it costs like $10,000, no one's gonna buy it. That kind of notion. So, and the studio size can be, related to the achievement for actually making the game, or lack thereof of achievement in some cases. So, let's get into the review. Alright, let's start with story. And just FYI, I will be spoiling most of the story. If you haven't played this, 5-year-old, or I guess it's almost 6 years at this point. Whatever. You haven't played this game so far, you have nothing to complain about. So to summarize, there's a big tree that has a fit when one of his little spirit friends disappears during a storm. During this fit, the tree manages to scorch the sky, killing a few baby owls. And the mother owl, Kuro, decides it would be a really good idea to murder the tree. I mean, justifiably, considering the tree murdered her kids. So, the elements, after the tree is dead, they go out of whack. Elements of water, wind, and not fire, warmth. Because everything had to start with W. So, yeah. Warmth doesn't sound too threatening, but it is in a volcano. So, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Ori, the orphaned spirit that fell out of the tree during the storm, must find and restore the elements to fix the tree. However, Kuro doesn't want the tree to be fixed because she's scared that the tree may kill her last remaining egg with another fit at some point. A reasonable assumption considering what happened last time. Of course, you know how it goes. By the end of the game, you found all the elements, Zelda style, and you're not quite fast enough to stop a ton of damage happening to the valley. So, Kuro sees all the damage coming into the valley, or the forest, whatever, and sees that her egg is within threat distance again. It's being threatened again. So, decides, maybe I should unmurder the tree, to put it one way. So she brings all the fused elements over to the center of the tree, and the tree does the sky fire thing again and disintegrates Kuro in the process. And yeah, that's it. Happy ending, right? See, I think that the story is probably the weakest part of this game. Now, I did abbreviate quite a bit of that, but the broad strokes are mostly the same. And to be perfectly honest, it's kind of simple. I mean, there's nothing wrong with simple. It doesn't make this game worse than it could have been, but it doesn't exactly make it better than it could have been either. So my feelings on the ending are probably to blame with my sourness on the story. The way it's portrayed, without spoiling the whole thing, is that there's no consequence to any events that happen in the game, except that the fact that Kuro and her chicks died. That's it. Big Tree loses Ori in a storm. Some seems to somehow know where he is. I'm not sure. Well, where Ori was, and lights the sky on fire anyway. Then, kills the chicks. Kuro attacks the tree, and then, realizing the tree might still be needed, restores the tree later on, and then the tree just kills her for her transgressions, I guess. Besides that, literally everything else that happened is undone. Every other character death didn't happen. The forest is all friendly and colorful again. But, I don't know, I like Owls. Thought it was kind of one-sided, the way the story is portrayed. Maybe I'm giving it a bit more credit than I like, but I don't know. It feels... If you're gonna give everyone a happy ending, give it to literally everyone. Because Kuro's motive was understandable. Killing her at the end seemed kind of token, I guess. I don't know. It just didn't feel like it fit with the story anymore. It's like, oh, why'd she die? Closure? I mean, she seemed to be friendly at that point. Was it a sacrifice? Whatever. Anyway, so that's my feelings on the story. So let's just move on to the rating. So, to rate the story, in the 3 categories I have, narrative pacing, be probably a 5 out of 10. Narrative is almost non-existent. It's go here, get a little bit of dialogue. Okay, that's it. Now go here, get a little bit of dialogue. It's not like you can... it's not like you can search deeper into the narrative of your own volition. Let's put it that way. The narrative is handed to you at specific points in the game, and that's it. So, it is paced rigidly, and if you do things in adverse order, if you run into a spot before you're supposed to go there, the narrative gets a bit different. Like, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, whatever. 5 out of 10. So, consistency for the game's narrative is an 8 out of 10. The story grips you really well in the beginning, and it stays that way for a long time till a certain point that I won't mention, and that's admittedly a dip, and then the ending is another dip in the consistency. But aside from that, the the game world tells most of the consistency of the story, because the forest is supposed to be ruined. So most of the forest is, therefore, ruined. It's consistent. So I'll give consistency an 8 out of 10. Or no, not consistency. Tone. Whoops. Confusing that a bit. Sorry. Tone is 8 out of 10. Tone's perfect. Almost perfect, obviously. Consistency is a 5 out of 10. Yeah. Sorry about confusing that. Yeah. Consistency's 5 out of 10 because of those two big dips. One of them is right in the center of the story, which completely shifts the narrative, and your character's motive almost completely disappears. And by the end, your character's motive didn't matter. So, whatever. So, with a 5 out of 10, 8 out of 10, and another 5 out of 10, the story's an 18 out of 30, so a 6 out of 10 overall. Now, 6 out of 10 sounds bad based on the metrics from nowadays. But you know, stay with me. I said this was the weakest aspect. I'll get to it. Alright? It'll go up. Don't worry about it. It doesn't hurt the game that much. The story's pretty much in the background. But I have to mention it because it has one in the first place. Okay? Okay. Alright. On to the next bit. Let's move on to gameplay. The gameplay starts well and ends well, but there are some hiccups in between. Namely, that you start off, or off the start, you feel like some of the controls are missing. Well, they are, but don't recognize that until later. It's rather par for the course for a Metroidvania game, to be honest. But with none of the usual, you lose all your powers that lets you know in the future this is what your character looked like. So somehow it feels a bit worse. It's just me, but then again, this is my review. So this may only be, though, because by the end of the game, you have so many different movement abilities that at the start it feels like you were missing both of your legs. There are 11 abilities overall, 2 of them from the Definitive Edition. One of them feels essential to the gameplay. Not sure how it was played before this. Is the dash ability. Maybe it's just me, but I was dashing all over the damn place. And not having that dash to speed up the game feels weird, I guess. I mean, Ori runs pretty fast to begin with, but the dash makes it all better. So, for the most part, the upgrades are pretty standard stuff. You have standard attack, you left click, charge attack, right? Wall jump, double jump, charge jump, glide, climb, ground slam, grenade. Okay, grenade isn't that standard, but bear with me. And the one, in my opinion, that makes the entire game work is bash. Bash lets you slow down time briefly and kick off a projectile, an enemy, or even your own grenades, and shoot back in what you're kicking off of in the opposite direction, allowing you to redirect enemy projectiles or jumping enemies. This mechanic alone makes the entire game work, and everything else serves to work around it. Double jump and dash refresh each time you bash. This allows for some insane mid-air movement techniques. Moving from the best thing, though, to, well, I wouldn't say the worst, but out of place, maybe, is what I would use. So, as you defeat enemies, explore, go through the game, whatever, you gain points to use to upgrade Ori in an ability tree. Now, some of these almost seem mandatory for exploration, namely the mid-air dash, triple jump, energy efficiency so that you can use grenades and whatnot to jump around or blow up walls. And this system seems unnecessary to me. I don't know. The RPG elements don't really add anything. There isn't anything like a boss fight. Well, at least not really. The best thing I would relate to a boss fight would be the escape sequences. And those only rely on your skill, not so much your abilities. Or RPG abilities. You need the abilities. So, the only reason to upgrade, like, for example, the damage tree, is to get past standard enemies faster, because they have a lot of health for no reason. And when you get the bash ability, you don't even have to do that. You can basically avoid everything, unless you're forced to fight things. The middle tree seems a bit odd, as the last ability lets you see secrets through walls, which seems counterproductive to an exploratory game. And the final, let's call it the movement tree, I guess. The final ability on the movement tree is to take less damage, which is, kind of boring as far as upgrades go. So, before I go on another tangent here, we'll sum it all up, right? Challenge, to start with. The game is quite challenging at times. I must have died at least 20 times during that stupid tree escape segment, but it was fun. It was a good challenge, requiring you to actually understand the game you were playing. But I think a decent amount of challenge comes from the complexity of the abilities that you have. Near the end, you have about 10 different abilities that let you move around in the air. And pressing the wrong button or holding the wrong button for too long can get you killed. For example, you're holding shift to climb up a wall, and you jump off straight into a spike because you didn't re-hold shift to start gliding again. It seems, a little messy. But aside from that, it's pretty challenging. I wouldn't say it's the most challenging game I've played, but it is decently challenging. So, and I'm gonna make a few people upset with this. To put that into perspective, I'd put the challenge at a 6 out of 10. Solid challenge. It never really made me angry, though. There are a few games whose challenge has made me very angry at a part that feels deliberately unfair. This was a very fair challenge. Challenge is a solid 6. It's right in the middle, it's good. Although, it's going to be a little weird reflecting that in the final score, but don't worry about it, I sorted all out. So, the game is kind of short. Finished it in just under 6 hours. 5 hours, 55 minutes about, I think. And while some areas are really trying, they are rather short, like, say, the anti-gravity section. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, it can be a little frustrating, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. So the challenge doesn't ramp up or anything, it's just there. So with that, yeah, 6 out of 10 challenge. And let's put button complexity at a 6 out of 10 too, which is complexity is in the opposite direction of challenge. The less complexity, the better. And the challenge, you know, the more, not necessarily the better, but it's more of a inference for people to watch, who are watching, to understand, oh, it's not that challenging, the buttons aren't that complex, but whatever. So, since gameplay elements are mapped to the same buttons multiple times, complexity stays at a 6 out of 10. And, well, for the last one, which would be skill ceilings. So, the skill ceiling is quite high, because the button complexity is decently, complicated. And I had a few moments of perfect zen doing a